Hello, Contact Festival. I'm Nikon Ambassador Kristian Bogner, and I'm really excited to be speaking to you today from the Rocky Mountains of Canada in Canmore, Alberta. And we're going to be talking today about intention vision creation. And whether you're a beginner or you're a pro photographer, these mindset steps will help you take your photography to the next level. So I grew up into the world of photography. At age 6, I was assisting my mom and dad on weddings. And by age 10, I was doing my first commercial shoots. At age 16, I started my own photography company, and it's all I've ever done from then till now, my entire life. And photography really is my passion. And I'm proud to be part of an 80-year legacy of capturing the light, starting with my grandfather, a master photographer who started Bogner Photography in Germany. He was a Leica ambassador and good friends with the owner of Leica, Ernest Leitz. My dad took over the photography studio and became a master photographer, and then my mom became a master photographer. And they have a big studio in Welland, Ontario. I moved out west, and I'm also a master photographer out here. So this is just a cool slide that I wanted to share. This is Photokina, and all those pictures on the wall are my grandfather's. I'm really proud of that. This was the biggest photography trade show of its time, and this was back in 1950. And here we are at Contact 2020, 70 years later, and I'm on the Nikon stage. And I'm really proud to be Nikon Ambassador, and I'm really excited to be sharing with you guys today. So let's get into it. Shooting for excellence, there are 3 mindset stages. Stage 1 is the intention stage. We have ideas and things coming at us all day long. This is where you want to grab onto an idea, connect to it, and set a positive intention that it will grow into something amazing. The next stage is the vision stage. This is where we want to create space for the vision. We want to nurture it with energy and let it grow. I love to give the example of, imagine a watering can filled with energy, and you want to basically pour that energy onto your vision and just nurture it, let it grow and become something. The clearer you can make the vision in your mind, the easier it will be to create. So once you've put enough energy into your vision and you're at the point where your positivity towards it is bigger than your fear for not completing it or fear that I can't do it, that's when it's time to act on your vision. Trust in your vision and do whatever it takes to see it through and push beyond the finish line. So we're going to start today, and I'm going to show a video where I put these steps into practice. And I was one of the 2 Canadians to be given the Nikon Z7 at a pre-production level to test out. And I was it was hand delivered to me, the camera, and I had only 2 weeks to produce all of this. And I wasn't prepped on it, so I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know what I was going to do. I hadn't planned any of these shoots, and I basically made all this happen using these 3 steps: intention, vision, creation. So here we go. Nikon's new mirrorless, the Z7. Nikon Canada gave me an assignment to shoot the Nikon Z7 for 2 weeks, to put it through its paces and shoot several different types of subjects, from landscapes to sports, portraits to commercial and video. Here is what I came up with. That's awesome. I like that pose. I wanted a technically difficult shooting scenario for the Z7, so I built a rain machine. This allowed me to test autofocus through the rain and workability with my Broncolor studio lights with high-speed trigger. I am just loving all the new video capabilities of the Z7. Focus peaking at all resolutions, 10-bit external output and N-Log, 120 frames per second, customizable autofocus and focus tracking, and of course VR on the sensor for stabilization. The detail on this camera is just incredible. One of the most amazing features is the 5 stops of VR on the sensor. I've actually been able to take landscape images at 1/4 of a second handheld without a tripod and gotten perfectly sharp results. That's a game changer. With the FTZ adapter, I can use all my existing Nikon lenses and they work just as they would on any of my other Nikon Pro bodies. From what I've seen, the Nikon Z mount is going to be something very, very special. Testing out some of the new Nikon Z lenses, I've seen some of the best bokeh and sharpest detail I've ever seen in a Nikon lens. I have to mention the electronic viewfinder because I honestly didn't think I was going to love it as much as I do. It has really changed the way that I shoot. To be able to look through the viewfinder and in real time see my exposure changes, see my white balance, and have an overlay heads-up display of different settings that I want to see, from my histogram to virtual horizon. I feel more connected than I ever have before to my camera and to the experience of photographing. All right, so that's what I was able to produce, and again, that was all shot in 2 weeks, including me filming myself with those components there. So I shot product shots for Nikon, I shot some products, I shot a bee in my backyard, I did some food photography, and I love the detail that I'm able to get with these new Nikon Z lenses. They are absolutely stunning, and they have such a beautiful, beautiful bokeh, and I really think they are the future. They are really incredible. I think the look and feel of them looks medium format, which is yeah, amazing. Amazing. I'm just really, really thrilled with the mirrorless system. And I did some landscape images. I even, during this time, I was the best man for my buddy at his wedding, and I had to fly out to Victoria. This was the morning of the wedding. This is his Porsche in front of his house here. I set up 4 SB5000 flashes and was able to get that shot. Love the detail again. This was some experimental stuff. We had a full moon, and I did some visual multiple exposures. I also did a cool jump park shot. One of the interesting things about this shoot was that I was photographing sort of incognito. We didn't want to, there to be any leaks with the camera, so we had tape on the Nikon mirrorless camera. So I went out and I photographed a buddy of mine here doing this jump in the jump park. We had to get out early without anyone else around. He only had a short window to shoot with, and so the light, you can see the light on the mountains in the background was perfect, but where we were shooting, it was still dark. There was still shade. And so I ran to the car. I had my Broncolor Move kit and used my studio strobe to illuminate the shot and get great lighting on the image. This was a shoot I did with my wife. And one of the things I always wanted to do was build a rain machine. And I decided, okay, well, I'm going to do it. And so I thought, so this was that whole idea of having this idea and then putting it into practice, right? And yeah, I built this thing. I watched some videos on YouTube. I built this rain machine. Sarah didn't want to get wet, so I sent her down to the dollar store to buy a cute umbrella, gave her some wine, and we were off to the races. Got some beautiful shots of my wife. I also got some shots of my good friend and mentor, Kristian. His name is the same as mine, and he has been my mentor learning Zen Buddhism for almost 10 years now. And he was a master of Japanese medicine. He trained in Japan. He was a monk, and he was a martial artist. And so really interesting guy, good friend, and I always wanted to photograph him, and he always said no, he didn't want to be photographed, it wasn't his thing. But this time was different, because this time I was so passionate and I had such clarity of vision. And when I asked him, I said, listen, I know exactly how I want to do this. And I explained to him, and I shared the vision, and I shared my positivity. And this time he said yes. And I got all these amazing images of him. Really a fun shoot. And I think that it was transformational. It was transformational for me. It was transformational for him, because you know, being photographed in this way, it wasn't something he ever really wanted to do. And in the end, I think he was also really proud of these images we were able to capture. After that shoot, the synchronicity, I had this model from Europe that I knew that called me and said, hey, I'm in town, do you want to do a shoot? And so I had this chalk dust that I had bought a long time ago, and I thought, you know what, I have this set up outside already. I had my black background set up for the rain shoot. I said, sure, you know, come on out. And we did this really cool shoot. And it was just, I think she only had 2 hours. So we did all this in 2 hours, did some cool chalk stuff. And I photographed her with a bit of a fog machine with a white background to create a kind of an interesting look to that image, that portrait image. So I think you can see by now that I love photographing different types of photography. I love shooting landscapes and sports and commercial and wildlife, anything that comes at me. And I love training different types of photography to become a better overall photographer. And it's just like an Olympic athlete, right? An Olympic athlete doesn't just show up at the Olympics. They practice, right? They're always practicing, they're always training. Or a jet fighter pilot, you know, they are also always, you know, they've been training their whole life so they can get up in one of these really expensive aircrafts and to be able to fly like that. So just like that, as photographers, we always want to be practicing, we always want to be training so we can get to that level of excellence that we want to be at. So when the right opportunity happens, we're ready for it. And here's a great example of that. And once you've mastered the 3 mindset steps, then it's time to learn to trust your intuition, right? Trust that inner voice inside you that says, I need to bring this lens, or I need to go out and shoot that. And you trust it. And this is a perfect example of that, photographing Jaws. So we booked a trip, my wife and I, and normally our trips end up becoming photo trips. And I promised her this time it'd be more of a vacation trip. So we agreed on the fact that I would only take 1 bag of gear. And luckily for me, I had my new Nikon mirrorless equipment, and they take up a lot less room because they're smaller and lighter weight. So I was able to fit 2 Z7s to Z6, so 500 PF, 24 to 70, 70 to 200, and probably 1 or 2 other lenses. So a substantial amount of gear I was able to still bring in my 1 pack. And we literally showed up in Maui, and the next morning we were at a coffee shop, and we were watching the television, and this was happening. Jaws was going off, and Jaws happens at this break in Piahi that only is actually big enough to surf a couple days a year usually. And we happened to be there at that time. So of course I looked over at my wife, I said, honey, I need to shoot this. And you know, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'll make it up to you. And she said, sure, okay, let's do it. And we finished our coffees. I ran back to the house, or the hotel that we had, and grabbed my gear. We drove out to this location, and when we got there, it looked like this. So it's about an hour hike in through the mud just to get to where you can photograph. And everybody was coming back. And there was a police officer at the entrance, and he said, it's over, someone got hurt. The event is over. And I was like, what? And I was like, no, I've come so far, I have to go anyway. So in my head, I took a moment, I checked in with myself, and my intuition said, no, I've got to go anyway. So I had hiking boots on, I grabbed my gear, I left my wife who just had sandals to catch up, and I literally ran through the mud as fast as I could, trying not to fall. And like some of the people, there were people that literally I was passing that were trying to get there, and they were literally covered head to toe in mud because they had fallen in. So I was trying not to fall in with my gear, but also get there as quickly as possible so that I could see for myself if the event was actually still going on. And sure enough, it was. this was all photographed, or this is all filmed handheld. So one of the other cool things is I didn't plan to be shooting any video. And so I basically showed up there, I'm photographing this, and I'm filming this handheld, and this is without any stabilization, this is without any kind of color work or anything. All I've done is a little bit of speed ramping here, and you can see what I was able to capture, and it really is phenomenal. It's a game changer for me to be able to show up at something like this and shoot something like this with a 500mm lens handheld and have it look this stabilized and this good. And it's because you have that vibration reduction right on the sensor, which is helping you stabilize. Really, really cool. So synchronicity wise, this was 2 days later. I actually was at a beach and I was talking to this windsurfer guy, and this windsurfer guy said, hey, we're going back to Jaws tomorrow. And so I asked my wife again, I'm like, can I go and shoot this? And sure enough, she said yes. I dropped her off at the Maui Brewing Company for a few hours and went out and photographed some windsurfers. Had a ball doing it. So these images were some of the ones I got. One of the things I wanted to share is that often when you get to an event or you're shooting something, you can sometimes, and it's this magnificent with these giant waves and there's so much to shoot, you often can just stay in the exact same spot and you just keep shooting the same thing. But having the awareness in that moment to say, you know what, I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to go move up on the embankment or move down on the embankment, move to a different location, try a different setting on my camera. I really encourage you to do that. Most of these images were shot at about 2,000th of a second. Again, hand holding. They're all pretty much shot with my 500 PF. Some of them were shot with a 500 PF plus a 1.4 times teleconverter. Yes, the subject was really far away. That break in PIE happens quite far out. So you need a really long lens to get great shots like this. This particular image I'm really proud of. It's one of my favorites from the shoot, called the Eye of Jaws. It recently won top 10 in the world at the World Photographic Cup. And I was actually supposed to be at the award ceremony in Italy a few months ago, but of course it all got postponed. We're hoping to do it in September, October. We'll see what happens. But basically, I'm in the top 10 of the world, representing Canada for the gold medal. And we'll see what happens. I hope the image does well. And one of the cool things about shooting on the Z7 like this is you can zoom in and just look at the detail, right? You can zoom right into the surfer, which I think is pretty cool because it transcends just a sports image. It can become really big printed 40 by 60 inch wall art as well at that resolution. Here's another example of me moving around on the embankment that I was shooting from. I went down a little bit lower and you can see, there's no Photoshop here. This is the actual wave. And you can see that from a lower angle, that wave really looks impactful. Here are a couple windsurfer shots. I'm utilizing the rule of thirds here, offsetting the windsurfer a little bit. Got some beautiful blue in the waves. I love the way you're drawn in there. In this particular image, I've got some really nice diverging lines and some really incredible colors. And sometimes you get lucky. In this image, I have the sun coming through the sail and reflecting some colors onto the water, which is what I really love about that particular image. Getting kite surfers in crop is difficult because their kite is always flying around. And I really love trying to get my image in full frame. That's something that I really work hard on. I try not to have to crop my images at all later on. Sometimes when I'm shooting sports or things like this where you can get disorientated as you're moving around, I will turn virtual horizon on in my display. So in my overlay display, it shows virtual horizon. It shows me where I have my clean horizon line. And then my awareness is paying attention to what I'm photographing or filming, but also paying attention to ensuring that I have a straight horizon line right in camera. And here's an example of where I've climbed up higher and I've shot it from a higher angle. And it's the same wave height, but of course from a higher perspective, the wave looks less, but it's an interesting perspective with the helicopter in the shot. right? It tells the story. And that's what it's all about, having the ability to tell stories, having the ability to shoot some film, some video, as well as stills, as well as move around and tell this story, shoot it with a little wider lens maybe, or go a little closer. This image was photographed with the 500 millimeter plus the 1.4 times teleconverter, so 700 millimeters. And I just, love being able to capture the action that's so far away with a kit that I can fit all in one big low pro backpack. It's pretty cool. So raise your energy. Everything is energy. And one of the things that I love to do is celebrate new gear and explore new lenses when I get them. So instead of going out or getting new gear and then putting it on right away and taking some shots, usually what I'll do is I'll get the new gear, put it on my camera, and then wait for a beautiful sunrise, wait for an opportunity to test out that gear. And the reason why I do that is because when I have new gear, at least for me, I feel like a little kid again. I feel like so excited to test it out. And in that moment of excitement, my energy is elevated. And in that elevated energy, quite often, I will actually take a better image. And that's taught me that anytime I really need to perform, anytime I really need to capture and create an amazing image, that I need to raise my energy. And that is something that I hope that I can inspire you to do, is when you go out and photograph, make sure you check in with yourself and like, am I excited about this photograph? And utilize that excitement to create a better image. So this was my 500 PF right before I went to Maui. It just came in a box. It got shipped to me, and I set it all up, put it on the camera, put it in my bedroom, literally in my bedroom. And my intention was that I was going to wake up in the morning, check the weather, and see what kind of sunrise I was going to have. And sure enough, I woke up and this was the sunrise that I got. And lucky to live where I do, I was able to go out onto my front deck, and I was able to actually photograph this from my deck with a 500 millimeters. At that focal length, I was able to see past all the houses around me and actually just zoom in on this really amazing mountain, and it really was a spectacular sunrise. And I'm always practicing. Even if there's a squirrel in my backyard, I'm always changing my focus modes. I'm always trying out different things, and I'm always being ready so that when it comes to that opportunity, like photographing the surfers or windsurfers, that I'm ready and those images are of excellence. Here's another example where I just got my new 85 millimeter and I wanted to test it out. I'm a real 85 millimeter fan, and I wanted to see how this stacked up against my previous generation 85 millimeters. So this was the new Nikon Z S-Line 85 millimeter, and I was given a challenge by my wife to do a setup in 20 minutes. So I went into my studio, I found some bubble wrap in a box, I strung it up really quick, set up a few lights, and I did a little shoot with this Grey Goose bottle. It was the only bottle I had in the house that wasn't open, I guess, and so I just kind of used that as an example. And I shot some stuff with my studio light, and then I also did a 20-minute shoot with my wife, and here is what we came up with. So this is the picture of Sarah, and you can see at f1.8, it looks amazing. Incredibly sharp detail on her eyes and a beautiful soft background. And here is my Grey Goose bottle. And what I decided to do with that is I wanted to shoot it stop down. So this was with lots of depth of field. And you can see this is what it looks like and how sharp the type is. And then now I've opened it up to f1.8, and you can see, look how soft that bubble wrap is in the background, yet look how sharp the type is. So that's what I love about the new mirrorless system and the new Z mount, and that is that you can basically shoot at any aperture and you're going to get incredibly sharp, perfect results, and you're going to get a buttery soft, beautiful bouquet like this. So here I'm shooting landscape images at f1.8. And I love that I can do that. I love the freedom that gives me. I shot all of these images with my 85mm. I like doing that as well. I love getting a new lens and just only taking that lens out on a shoot and shooting everything with that lens for an entire day, just so I can get flexible with it, just so I can maybe shoot things or be forced to shoot things that normally I wouldn't, and practice with that. So I saw that red Camaro out on my drive, and on the same drive, I came across this beautiful grizzly bear. And I actually had the car stopped, and the grizzly bear passed me, and I photographed this right out my window. And you can see the incredible detail and the beautiful bouquet behind her. So make it happen. Stay positive and push through any obstacles. Inspire a subject with your excitement for your images you are creating, right? You always have that capability, right? You always have the opportunity to push through things, and just your excitement can be infectious, and it can really change the flow of how a shoot goes. So I was doing this shoot of this model, and I've got a cluster of SB 5000 flashes, and the shoot went fine, but it wasn't what I wanted. And so I convinced her with some hot chocolate and some blankets just to stick around a little longer. And I was trying to encourage her to stick around for this. I was really hoping, I saw the way the clouds were forming, and I thought, my intuition told me that this could be a spectacular sunset. And sure enough, it was. The sun reflected off the clouds. It got this beautiful red. My intuition paid off. I got reflection in the water. I used my flashes, my Nikon flashes, to illuminate the subject. Yeah, and it was exactly what I had in mind. And I got some other great shots with alpenglow and afterglow. So after the sun went down, I got some really nice images where I'm exposing for the available light, but I'm using my Nikon flashes to light the subject with some directional light. And I'm changing my white balance in camera to create that nice warm look on their face, which I think looks very, very pleasing. So we've talked a lot about flow and a lot about just sort of like, being at the right place at the right time with the right gear and the right you. And now I want to chat about commercial photography, because clients are paying you to produce. And this is where visualization stage is very critical to make sure you bring the right gear to a shoot. Here I'm photographing, I've got my VW there, and I'm photographing this private jet. And I've got 6 studio strobes and a whole bunch of gear. And on that day I was filming and photographing, and everything had to be right? I mean, they had grounded this aircraft for the entire day for me to photograph it. So I had to get it right. If I forgot a trigger or a transmitter or an extension cord, or if I forgot anything in my kit, it could have been a bad day. And that's where you practice so that you always make sure you can visualize your shot before you go and do it, especially if you're traveling, and you always make sure you bring the right gear. And you're able to execute in the time allotted, and that's just taking these three mindsets, and really putting them into practice. So here are a few of the images I got of the interior of that shoot, and I made it look like we were flying the aircraft because I lit it from the outside in with a lot of light, and produced some really cool images. One of the things that I was able to do with this particular shoot was to create an air-to-air looking image by shooting it with a 500mm. After the shoot was done, I asked the pilots, I said, hey, are you guys taking off anytime soon? They were, so I stuck around, and we used text to just confirm what runway they're taking off. I rushed like crazy to get the car to the right spot, and I was able to photograph this aircraft just as it took off, and then this is just as the landing gear folded up. I was able to get 1 or 2 shots off, and this is one of the ones that we ended up using for a cover for them. So allow your vision to be. Don't let negativity or fear get in the way. Often it's not the circumstances that get in the way of us achieving our vision. It's us, right? It's our limiting belief systems. And no matter what, sometimes when you're put into the pressure cooker, when the pressure's on, when it's more difficult, we fall back on these limiting belief systems and we let fear sometimes get in the way even more. Here's an example where I was doing a shoot. I was a last minute asked to be part of the shoot. We were photographing all these BMWs and I was working alongside a film crew. And I thought I'd have lots of time with or ample time at least, with these cars. But I ended up only having 10 to 15 minutes per car, where the film crew had an hour and 15 minutes per car. They didn't want me shooting stills while they were doing the filming because they wanted me helping with the lighting. And we ended up using a lot of my lighting on this shoot. And so I helped them with the lighting, and then I had a very, very short amount of time with these beautiful cars. But I had to execute. And so I basically just relaxed myself, took a deep breath, and just went with the perspective that I just had to get one great shot of each car, right? And I just sort of focused and I made it happen. One of the things that I love about the Nikon mirrorless system as well, which is a big game changer for me, is again the VR on the sensor, because what it enabled me to do in this high pressure situation is shoot without a tripod, move around very quickly. I was able to drag the shutter for a little longer exposures, probably for like a 15th or a 30th of a second, to capture some of that atmosphere from the fog projector and the fog machine. And I was able to do that because I was able to use that VR on the sensor. It helped me stabilize, and I was able to get the shoot done fast, and I was able to hustle because of that. And it's things like that in the commercial environment that can be the difference between getting the shot of excellence and getting a shot that's just good enough for the client. In this situation, you know, these images far exceeded the client's expectations, and they were really excited, and you know, hopefully I'll be able to do more work for them as a result of it. So getting back to fear and these limiting beliefs, someone once told me that fear stands for false evidence appearing real. And this is a great image as a background. This is a guy on a slack line right up behind my house here. I was just on a hike and I saw this guy. They had set up a slack line and he was doing this crazy gap here. And this image always reminds me of this acronym, false evidence appearing real. And it's that we create the fear, right? We create it in our own minds. It's not necessarily there. And even in a situation like this, where I was photographing this grizzly bear, I was all by myself, and this grizzly bear was coming at me. And sure, I felt this feeling of fear. And I think the important way to deal with fear is notice it, notice that it's there, breathe into it, and release that fear, and breathe it out. And it's okay to acknowledge that you're afraid of it, or you acknowledge that there's a fear there, but it's important to be able to let it go in order to clear your pathway, in order to clear yourself for you to create that vision, right? And I was able to do that in this circumstance where, you know, I was able to let go of the fear of the grizzly bear coming at me so that I could focus back on focusing on her eyes and making sure that I had razor sharp focus. And, you know, I got the shots. And then after the mama bear came the cubs and got the shots. And then mama bear gave me a nice smile. I think that it's really important to have that communication with wildlife to make sure, you know, they know that, you know, you're there and you know that they're there, and you never ever want to make them feel threatened in any way. So I always kind of like make sure I get that sense that they're good. If they're exhibiting any kind of behavior that would let me think that they are feeling threatened, I will really back off and give them their space. I think that is really important. Really encourage you to do that if you're ever photographing wildlife. So the interesting thing about this shoot with the grizzly bears was that my intention that day was to go and photograph landscapes with the beautiful fall colors and the fresh snowfall that we had. And sure enough, I came across these grizzly bears. Luckily, I was prepared with my 500 PF and I was ready to photograph it, and it ended up getting some fantastic images, both landscapes and the bears and some other wildlife while I was at it. So let go of your expectations. Things don't always happen the way you plan for it, right? I was out shooting landscapes and I got some wildlife was my wonderful takeaway from that day. Practice seeing and photographing the moment for what it is instead of what you want it to be. How many of you have ever seen an Instagram photograph and then went out to that same location and it totally didn't look like what you thought it was going to look like, and it threw you off and it caused you to miss getting the shot the way that you wanted to get? Or you're expecting a sunny day and you got a cloudy day and it changed your perspective. So one thing that I always like to do is, if I'm having a bad day, I like to change my perspective. I will visualize clicking my lens off and clicking my lens back on, and I call it putting my awesome lens back on. I just change my perspective. Here's a great example of that. I had the 800 FL, an incredible wildlife lens, for one day to test out. So I decided I'm going to get up at 5:30 in the morning. I'm going to go out into the wilderness and I'm going to go look for wildlife. And from 8:30 in the morning till 2 that afternoon, I saw no wildlife whatsoever. I couldn't believe it. I was frustrated and I was ready to give up because I'm like, you know what? I've been at it all day. Instead of giving up, I decided I was just going to reframe and I wasn't going to give up. And I set a positive intention that I was going to come across some wildlife. Shortly afterwards, about 2:30, I came across this beautiful female coyote running in the Indian paintbrush, wildflowers. Spectacular. And that really changed my whole perspective. And then after that, I came across this grizzly bear with her cubs. And she gave me about 45 minutes just to watch and photograph her with her cubs. She didn't feel threatened. And it was just some magical time I had there with her. And then on the way home, I came across this Osprey family and I got an incredible photograph of the Osprey. All in one day, all in a day that I almost gave up, but I didn't. I stuck through it and I was able to get some great images. You know, change your perspective, look up, look around, look, change your perspective, and it will change your reality. Okay, it'll change your reality. Here's another example of preparedness and trusting your intuition. I was out photographing with fellow Nikon Ambassador Michelle Valberg, and she invited me to go photograph these wild horses with her. And we were both photographing with very long lenses all day. I believe I had the 600, she had the 800. It was raining out all day, but I also had my 70-200 FL slung on my shoulder with another camera body. And as we were walking back to the cars, these two stallions just came right by me and were like here and doing their thing. And I was able to switch to my 70 millimeters on the 70-200 and capture this image. So being prepared is always really, really important. Knowing your gear, having it turned on, having it ready to go, having it that you can react in a moment's notice. This image was captured coming home from a ski day with my wife, and it was just perfect light on Castle Mountain. It's one of my favorite mountains here in the Canadian Rockies. I've actually slept at the top of one of those spires, which was quite the climb up with lots of camera gear and quite the rappel down, but a whole lot of fun. And this image here, you know, it was such a still reflection in the water. And that was a rare thing. And I was able to capture it because I left my camera in the car, I had it ready, and I kind of purposely made sure that we were coming home at alpengo line time just in case. And so you kind of set, again, these intentions that, hey, I'm going to bring my camera today because on the way home, there might be a beautiful alpenglow, there might be a beautiful sunset. And again, you trust your intuition and make it happen. This particular image was just the result of me carrying my camera with me. I was actually scouting a location for a photo walk I was going to do, but I brought my camera, one lens, and sure enough, I saw this beautiful lonely tree, and I was able to use the VR on the sensor to allow me to shoot handheld at 1/15 of a second and get this beautiful movement in the water behind the tree. These were examples of having my 500 PF in the car. And of course the moon looks huge because I'm shooting with such a long focal length. Hiking with my camera, I came across some puffins. And these days, what I've really been enjoying doing is not just photographing still images of some of the wildlife that I'm doing, but I've also been doing some slow motion video. Now, the new cameras have either a slow motion mode, which you can work with, or they actually have 120 frames per second or 60 frames per second, so you can dial in the frames per second. The slow motion works just fine. I prefer to set my frame rate. So in these circumstances, I've got my frame rate to 120 frames per second, and then I'm rendering that at either 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. So I'm able to slow it down. And one of the cool things about doing that is you get to slow down yourself. You get to look at the world from a little slower perspective. And it's a really interesting thing to do and a really beautiful thing to be able to do, to be able to slow it down and look at it and share that with others. So it is important, in order to stay inspired, that you take time to photograph for you. Take time to find your inner child, to connect, to play, and to practice. Not when you have a deadline, not when you have an assignment, not when you have to, get the shot because someone's counting on you, but just time for you to connect to the energy around you and record that energy through the art of photography. So that means getting up early and photographing the sunrise, right? Photographing when it's cold outside and there's ice forming on the water. Photographing when you're ready to go to bed and you look out the window and there are these epic stars out there and it's late and the last thing you do is feel like doing is getting your gear and putting it all in the car. But once you get in the car and you start driving towards a dark area and you set up, it's just an event that is unforgettable, right? And you get some incredible images in the process. It might mean carrying your camera, even though it's a little bit heavy, skiing all day. So when the sky does an interesting thing and you see this cool rider going off the jump, doing a front flip, you're ready and you can get the shot. You can get it with excellence. All right? It's all about taking your camera with you wherever you go, whenever you can, so you can get the shot. Here's another example where I had to ride up with this rider, and so the mirrorless cameras really give me a lot more freedom because they weigh just a lot less. And in this shoot here, this was just a fun shoot, just a fun day, but I decided to bring my one camera, my Nikon Z7 with one lens, so I could shoot some pan shots and a small drone. And I was able to produce this all handheld, and I was able to carry my backpack, and I was able to ride up and ride down with this rider is riding, which is steep, right? So the less gear you have weighing you down, the less gear you have, the better, and the more fun you're gonna have in the process. And it doesn't always have to be a big production, right? Sometimes just going out and practicing and just going out and playing is what it's all about. And if you go out and play and have a great time, photographing, doing your passion, and you end up producing something cool out of it, then great. And if it becomes a learning experience, then great. I think the important thing is that bring your camera with you, do what you can. This is me on the ski hill. This is me with the Nikon D6. I was really fortunate to have a little play with the new Nikon D6. It is absolutely spectacular. I know I talk a lot about the mirrorless camera systems, and I love the mirrorless camera system, but I also love my D5, and now I'm definitely gonna love the D6. I found that the D6 focused better than anything that I've ever used before. I literally could not miss a focus point, and I skied with it. I shot some World Cup speed skating with it. And I even got this shot out on the ski hill. I carried it all day skiing with me. And this was a kind of an interesting shot because we just got a dump of snowfall, and I decided I was going to wait for them to open. I was talking to some of the patrollers, and I was waiting for them to open this one area of the mountain that hadn't been skied in a couple days. I'd heard them avalanche bombing, and I knew that, you know, if I could catch and be one of the first people, this could be something great. And so I waited up there, and then when they opened it up, I rushed, tried to get ahead of everybody, just totally going as fast as I could. And I skied as fast as I could until this one little area that I knew there might be some really good powder pockets. And I saw this patroller up at the top, and he was just about to drop in. And I wasn't prepared yet, but I basically skied while pulling my pack off, opening it up, pulling the D6 out, and I was able to quickly adjust my exposure and bam, get the shot. And I got about, you know, a couple frames just as he skied through this powder pocket. And that's what it takes, right? It's about being ready at that moment so that you can nail it when that opportunity comes. And there's nothing more exciting than that, especially with sports photography, than nailing it when that opportunity presents itself. And you know what? You have no time to get the shot, but you get it anyways. So ignite your passion with purpose. One of my favorite sayings is, the bigger the why, the smaller the how. And I want to end today to telling you about a really cool opportunity that I had and sharing it with you. So I was given the opportunity to go to Rwanda, and I only had about 2 weeks to prep for this. And actually in that 2 weeks, I actually built that rig that you saw on my back. I shot this whole thing with the D850s, which was another incredible camera system. And yeah, as you can see, I built this rig that attached to my low pro backpack. And what I was able to do here is, through the film that I created that was shown at the World Economic Forum, and through the stills and some of the work that I did, I was able to help raise money for 600,000 cook stoves and water filters for the poorest Rwandans. And I was really proud to be able to do something that made a difference like that. I was proud to be able to connect with these people, put some smiles on their faces, give them some hope, and inspire them, and just show that, hey, the rest of the world cares. And the company that I was shooting for, they have water projects all over the world. And I've done several projects for them. And it feels so good to be able to put my art and have it matter, right? Have it make a difference in the world. And I think we all have that capacity. We all have that capacity to use our art to make others smile, to inspire them, to literally change the world, to shine a light on different areas of the world, to do different things. And again, in this situation, water, something that we are so used to in North America, just having clean water to drink, you know, being able to do something that can provide clean drinking water for people that don't have it was something that really was very fulfilling for me. So here are a couple of the still images I captured. There's my rig again. Here are a few of the beautiful photographs and the beautiful moments that I had from that trip. And this all happened because I said yes. So I'm going to leave you with this. Say yes to the moment and let your art matter. Thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I hope it inspired you. I hope, you know, it gave you some tools that you can apply to your creativity. I'm working on some stay-at-home challenges that I'm going to be putting on my website. So some more instructional stuff. If you want to check that out, it'll be on my website, my Instagram @Kristian Bogner, and my YouTube channel. Thank you again so much, and I hope to see you all soon.